Welcome back. You're watching Nation Tonight. The Russian elections are over, but the election results aren't exactly surprising. Vladimir Putin has been elected. And yes, I say elected as the Russian president for his fifth term, which will keep him in power until at least 2030. Calling it a landslide victory would be an understatement. Putin received 87% of the vote, which means that he will become the longest-serving Russian leader since Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. At 77%, the election saw a record number of turnout in the post-Soviet era, and all three of Putin's opponents struggled to even get half a dozen vote share. Now, as expected, the West had queued up to mock Putin's re-election. While Ukraine said that Putin has become sick with power, the United States and the European Union said that the elections were neither free nor fair. Germany even went a step ahead by labeling it as a pseudo-election, which violates international law. China and Iran were two of the major nations that congratulated Putin on the decisive victory. But Vladimir Putin remains unfazed, and if his win didn't surprise anyone, his victory speech surely did. Putin not just hailed the transparency of the Russian election, he also said that no matter how many attempts are made to intimidate Russia, none will succeed. He also hailed the country's armed forces and even warned of a full-scale World War III, an apparent response to Macron's suggestion of deploying ground troops in Ukraine. Amid allegations of wiping out the opposition, Vladimir Putin also called Navalny's death a sad event and said that such things have also happened in the United States. Joining me on the broadcast tonight, Mr. Anil Trigunayat is a former ambassador, and Mr. Pathikrit Payne, geopolitical analyst. Good evening. Namaskar to both of you. Ambassador Trigunayat, let me start with you. First of all, how do you see this? There are no surprises here. The fact that Vladimir Putin has won. But is this to be seen as also a referendum by the people to the decisions that Vladimir Putin has taken so far, considering the fact that you've seen one of the largest turnout of voters since the post-Soviet era also this year?
Well, as you know, that against President Putin, there were three candidates, and those three candidates really did not have any following whatsoever. And we have seen these kind of elections every time. We have witnessed that Putin has remained the most popular leader, irrespective of the kind of the press he gets in the West. He stays a popular leader. There is no doubt about it. There are various polls conducted by different kind of organizations. So, but his winning, this is the fifth time he is there, and perhaps, as some indicate, it is in 200 years would be the longest tenure of any leader. And the fact that he has been able to continue with this is the strong man macho image, which he developed in 1999, 2000, when he came on the scene, and he wanted to retrieve the Russian pride, and that was totally humiliated during the disintegration of Soviet Union. And therefore, that is one of the reasons it happened. Secondly, if you see the Russian people, they are very proud people. They have suffered, and they are probably one nation which can tolerate the adversities like nobody else does. 26 million of the Russians were killed in Second World War. So when a question comes to war on Russia by itself, most people during this particular scenario, while you think that why he has got the highest number of votes at this time when he's already in power for more than 20 years, is the fact that Russia is at war at the moment. People may not approve of the war, but at the same time, not all people, but at the same time, when the country is at war, they stand behind a strong leader. This is also being made out that this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between Russia and the West. And that is why I think that Putin has been able to sustain. His economy is stabilized now. He has moved his focus from West towards the East, towards Asia, mostly. Yeah. So his isolation is also not complete as the West would make her out to be. The global South is broadly standing with him.
And therefore, Pathikrit, you know, the fact that he has been isolated, the West has come out quickly after these results criticizing the fact that these are not free and fair elections, that also has perhaps worked for him domestically?
Well, the
Sure,
fact
good
is
evening.
that, I mean, the Western countries,
Uh,
in my personal view, have little to boast
Ambassador
about as
Trigunayat, I'll
far as
come to
democracy
you.
is
This
concerned.
was for Pathikrit.
Thank you, Shreya. See, I think
Yeah,
the
Pathikrit,
West
go ahead.
still fails to understand that you cannot win the Russian hearts and minds by humiliating Russia. And that is what they have done for a long time. Post the disintegration of USSR, as Ambassador mentioned, Russia was like a headless chicken. It was Vladimir Putin who put in a resilient country which can wither through difficult situations of wars and sanctions and still can emerge as an economy worth taking care of or worth reckoning. So if you look at what the West has done over the last 3-4 years, they have attempted regime changes. They have tried to paint Putin as a sick person who is about to die. They have tried to push weapon systems to the hilt to wage a war against Russia. Ukraine has been armed to the teeth, and in spite of all these things, Putin survived. And not only it survived, it ensured that the commodity surplus country called Russia still rules the rules when it comes to the commodity market. So the West can keep on doing whatever it wants, but the reality is this: it is none of West's business to decide who the people of Russia would vote for. At the end of the day, come what may, it is the reality that President Putin is the numero uno and the most powerful leader of Russia. And for a multipolar world, it is actually a good news. That era is gone where the West would control the narrative. The West would decide who is the evil and who is a hero and icon. The West would decide what multilateral institutions should do. So that era is gone. So even today, even if the Western media keeps on barraging criticism on Vladimir Putin, it does not impact at all so far as the Russian people is concerned, and so far as the anti-Western bloc or West or the bloc which is separate from the Western world is concerned. And that's why you would see, as Ambassador also mentioned, the global South countries like India have come out and overwhelmingly congratulated President Putin. What the West fails to understand, that Russia is too big a country, too giant an economy so far as a supplier of commodities is concerned, to be destabilized. Today, much of the problems that Western Europe is facing is because of the sanctions that the West has imposed on Russia. As a result of this, which the prices of commodities in the West has gone up. So, today, President Putin has come out as unscathed, and I think it's a great occasion so far as creating a genuine multilateral world is concerned, creating, if not a de-dollarized world, but a world where dollar plus other currencies would also have some space to work on, and a great move or a great day for BRICS expansion and creating an institution which in certain ways can
everything
question the
taken
West.
into consideration. Yeah, everything taken into consideration, whatever you said about Western countries trying to dominate the narrative and trying to, influence decisions across the world. But Ambassador Trigunayat, the fact of the matter is also that there have been criticism and there have been allegations against Vladimir Putin regarding his opposers being either jailed or allegedly killed. Case in point, the latest being Alexei Navalny's death.
I'm not an apologist for Putin, but the fact remains is that in a democracy, if you call a democracy a country, a certain amount of dissent is absolutely essential. And that is possible there. And there are dissenters, even while we have seen, even during this time, while the elections were held, there were protests in Russia and different parts of the world. So there is a certain number of people who are either against the war, which is ongoing, or they are against Putin, which is a natural phenomena that happens in any country where there is people have a say. But the fact is, a very large number of people have come out to vote, not only in Russia, but outside Russia and different parts of the world. And they have conveyed their message. So this is what I agree with Pathikrit, that why are, the Western countries, they might say anything, but they really don't have much to boast about as far as their own democracies are concerned. USA is a great example of that, what happened on January 6th in 2020, that the transition of power was such a major problem. And when a candidate like Trump now says that there'll be a bloodbath and all those kind of things, you need to understand that the institutions, and I always say that Westminster style of democracy is not the gold standard of democracy. Countries have very different kind of approaches. They have different socio-economic backgrounds. In many countries where the tribals are there, they have a very different kind of a mindset and approaches. Russia has a history of 1,000-odd years where there have been strong people who have, except for the disintegration period, when we saw weaker leadership in Russia. But then, since then, there has been mostly very strong leaders in Russia. So people look up to those kind of leaders. I think that's the reason that they are pushing him. And now he does come out as a macho man. He goes around, as your clipping is also showing, despite what many of the people indulging in gray zone warfare try to show him as sick and killed or died or whatever it is. So despite all that, he has been able to come back and will continue for next 6 years.
Okay, Pathikrit, then let me also ask you, with this new term that Vladimir Putin has won, what are the challenges now and what's next for Russia? There's already a war that's going on. There are Western sanctions. The gas pipelines had been blown up. All of this combined with the fact that there's an aging population, there's an aging, ministers of Putin's cabinet are also aging. All of that combined, how do you think this is going to pan out the next few years for Vladimir Putin?
Shreya, definitely you're right that they have to look towards the future in terms of succession, what they want to do in the next 20, 30 years. But this victory has definitely given fillip to Russia to actually think and save time for that. I want to mention one thing. There may have been a lot of people who would have otherwise been critical of President Putin and Russia. But the West has played the game of regime change so many times. The West has pushed countries to conflict so many times that today, even those who would have otherwise criticized Putin and would have stayed away from Russia are more than willing to shake hands with Russia and stand beside Russia. So I think it is a reality. Russia has an issue with population, but it has huge repository of resources. So I would not be surprised if in near future there are strong collaborations happening with countries like India, where a large number of Indian, young people would be allowed to learn the Russian language, go to Russia, work on mines and other areas where there's a huge requirement of human resource. So I think this is a great opportunity for many of the BRICS countries to, strengthen BRICS, especially India and Russia, to work on areas of convergence. India is a huge market. Russia is huge in terms of their technological repository. Russia has, resources. It doesn't have the population. So I think you would see areas where client and a vendor relationship getting replaced by areas where there would be joint collaboration and development of alternatives. For example, whether it's a unified payment system, whether it is an alternative to multilateral institutions, whether it is an alternative to a currency, you would see at least it would give a fillip to many of these countries to think that enough is enough. It is not about, shunning the West, but it has to be West plus others. It cannot all the time be West. That's what I think, that Russia, this election will give them time to think about those things. And my last point, West must also introspect that they need to give some space to Russia. They cannot keep on inventing enemies all the time for the sake of their military-industrial complex to actually have enemies to fund their wars. They have to rethink about a lot of things. Back to you.
Well, this is an election year in the United States. We'll really have to see if that happens. But I'll wrap it up here and we'll have to see how it pans out for Russia as well. Ambassador Trigunayat and Pathikrit, thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on Nation Tonight and sharing your perspective. Thank you. Namaskar.